Benjamin Zander is one of the most accomplished and influential living musicians in America today. He has been the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra and has served in many other capacities as well, including as a wonderful and innovative teacher to some of the best musicians in our country. He had been doing this for many years, and one day he sat down with his wife, Rosamond, and said, "Something's wrong, something's missing. The way we teach just has to be changed." And they talked about what we call the typical American grading scale, where you have A's and B's and C's. And he said, "I notice this every year with all of my students. Those who are probably the most likely to get B's and C's know that there's only so many A's to be handed out, and so they approach music with fear. They approach music with anxiety. They're so afraid of making mistakes because they might slip down a little bit. And those that are towards the bottom of the B's might get a C, and those who are at the bottom of the C's might actually get below a C, and that would be horrible in their minds." And he said, and it's not just the B's and the C's. I notice also those students who are most certainly to get A's, they approach music with fear and anxiety as well. And they come to my music interpretation classes and my music performance classes with all this fear and anxiety, because if you're going to get an A, and somebody does better than you, and you slip down just a little bit, then you've got to worry about the person that's at the top of the B+. Maybe if you make a mistake, they're going to step into your place. And so he said to his wife, Rosamond, "Everything I see is just wrong with this picture. People approach music with fear and anxiety. That's the opposite of what music is here for." And so the two of them came up with a plan. And he approached his class on the very first day that year, after teaching for about 25 years, and said, "Everybody in the class is going to get an A." And the class just looked at him like he had lost his mind. And he said, "There's only one thing you have to do. In the next few days, you have to write me a letter. And in this letter, you have to date it the end of May of this coming year, because it was a year-long class, and you have to tell me what you did to deserve the A, and what your accomplishments are, what your benchmarks were. In other words, I want you to write the letter in May as if the year has already been accomplished, and then all you have to do is what you've said you're going to do in that letter." And they just stopped and thought, And he said, "You have to write it in the present as if you are in May already." So anyway, in his book, The Art of Possibility, and this is written by Rosamond and Benjamin Zander, in the book, he actually talks about this idea he had and what an amazing difference it made for his students. And he wrote down some of the letters that I'm going to read to you, just a couple of them right now. And I read this book years ago, and it made a profound difference in the way I approach everything, whether it's preaching or ministry or my art or just living life, being a father. It's like, let go of the fear and the anxiety and the idea of you've got to be perfect, because there's only so much to go around. But anyway, I'm going to begin with a letter by someone who is most likely Chinese, and many of his musical students are brilliant in many, many ways beyond music. But as I read the letter, you're going to notice that this person's first language is probably not English. And so I just want you to know that I'm going to read it just like it is written. And it's dated next May. "Dearest teacher, Mr. Zander, I received my grade A because I worked hard and thought hard about myself taking your class. And the result was absolutely tremendous. I became a new person. I used to be so negative person for almost everything, even before trying. Now I find myself happier person than before. I couldn't accept mistakes about a year ago. And after every mistake, I blamed myself. But now I enjoy making mistakes And I really learn from these mistakes. In my playing, I have more depth than before. I used to play just notes, but now I found out about the real meaning of every pieces, and I could play with more imagination. Also, I found out my value. I found myself so special person because I found out that if I believe myself, I can do everything. Thank you for all the lessons and lectures because that made me realize how important person I am and also the clear reason why I play music. Thank you. Sincerely, Esther Lee. I'm going to read you one other letter by a student by the name of Giselle, dated next May. Dear Mr. Zander, I got my A because I had the courage to examine my fears, and I realized that they had no place in my life. I changed from someone who was scared to make a mistake in case she was noticed to someone who knows that she has a contribution to make to other people, musically and personally. Thus, all the diffidence and lack of belief in myself are gone. So too is the belief that I only exist as a reflection in other people's eyes and the resulting desire to please everyone. I understand that trying and achieving are the same thing when you are your own master. And I am. I have found a desire to convey music to other people, which is stronger than the worries I had about myself. I have changed from desiring inconsequentiality and anonymity to accepting the joy that comes from knowing that my music changes the world. As I read through these letters of people that already imagined their A at the end of the term, I was so moved by what had changed with them already. It was the first week of classes, and everyone in that class was acting like an A student. And Benjamin Zander was blown away by the way that people played with imagination and passion like never before. As I thought about that idea of everybody getting an A, I thought, I wonder what it would be like if we took that approach, not just with school, but all of life. You're just given an A for everything you do in God's eyes. Imagine how that would change you. Imagine if it was an A plus. Imagine if God said to you, well done, even before you got started. Imagine if God said to you, perfect, even before you sang your first note. Imagine the freedom that you would have, regardless of what it is that you do with your life or what God has called you to be and to do. The Bible calls this grace. Grace is something that is good, that is freely given without any strings attached, and not because you deserve it necessarily, not because you've earned it, not because you've done anything at all. It's just a gift. Grace. There you go. You get your A in life. As I was reading this morning's gospel lesson about Mary, it occurred to me that this is a story about grace. Imagine Mary, this teenage girl that's engaged to be married a man that she may have never even met before. In that culture, when you were a teenage girl, your parents picked your husband for you, and many times you had never even met your husband. Imagine what that must have been like for her. 14, 15, maybe 16. That was getting old back then. And knowing that pretty soon She was going to be married to this man that she knew nothing about, except what her parents told her. And I imagine that she had all sorts of thoughts going on in her mind, like, oh gosh, I hope, God, that he is a good husband. I hope he's going to be kind to me. I wonder if he's going to be a good father. I wonder if my marriage will be good and happy and joyful at all. And not only wondering about Joseph, she must have had many thoughts about herself as well. Will I be a good wife? Who knows? Will I be able to have children? Will I be a good mother? And then all of a sudden, the angel Gabriel just showed up out of nowhere to this young teenage girl with all these thoughts going on in her mind and said to her, I'm using Benjamin Zander's words now, guess what? You get an A+. Mary was told by Gabriel, you have found favor with God. And that is grace. She hadn't even begun her marriage. She hadn't had Jesus yet. And the messenger from God showed up and said, you have God's favor already. And I kind of think that knowing that she got that A+ before she even got started allowed her to live a truly remarkable life, because indeed, Joseph was a good husband and she was a good wife, and they were good parents to Jesus. And he was not, as we know now, just an ordinary child. As the gospel writer tells us, Gabriel told Mary, he's actually going to be our future emperor. He's going to rule the world, and his reign will last forever. Gabriel told Mary, he will be called Son of the Most High, which was actually a term used for the Roman emperor. Mary must have just had her jaw hit the floor when she heard all this from Gabriel. But I think the key in the whole story is you have found favor with God. And as I thought about this, I thought, how many times do I act? Do I do things? Do I speak? And do I prepare, wondering if I have God's favor and wondering if I'll measure up and wondering if God will be pleased with me? And my guess is that some of you have had some of those same thoughts as well. But wouldn't it be just remarkable if we could all hear those same words from Gabriel to Mary? You have found favor with God. You have found favor with God. You have found favor with God. This week, I was paying extra careful attention to the news and just listening to all the stuff that's going on. And it occurred to me that we continue to live in a very violent world. It's always been violent, but as I thought about some of the things happening just this past week and also over the past year, I thought, gosh, we've got this nuclear warhead thing going on in North Korea. We've got all these women coming out now saying, I received sexual violence when I was younger, and many women saying just not that long ago, others saying it was 40 years ago. Of course, we're constantly hearing things about gun control or the lack thereof and the influence that gun violence is having on our society. I'm sure I could go on all morning just talking about all the things that are that's going on. Jerusalem and the violence that has always been a part of that city, and how Jerusalem seems right now for some of the greatest violence it's ever seen. And people are deeply, deeply concerned about peace in this world. And on this day when we light the candle of peace, I had to look at today's gospel lesson and say to myself, God says to all of us, you have found favor with God. And I often ask myself, what can I do so that there will be more peace in the world? What can I do? And as I thought about the gospel lesson today, there were a few key points that stuck out for me. And one was the message from Gabriel when he first showed up to Mary: don't be afraid. And I think I need to remind myself of that over and over and over. Don't be afraid, because if I approach violence with fear, there's just going to be more violence. Don't be afraid. One of the things I talked to Phyllis Kunimura about just a few days ago, the day before she passed, I asked her if she had any fears, and she thought for a moment and said, no, I really don't have any fear at all. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all say that? No more fear. And just think what a difference our world would be like if we just decided not to have fear anymore, whether it was for grades in a music class or the fear of dying or anything else in between. Another key point in this morning's gospel lesson is when Gabriel told Mary, nothing is impossible with God. And as I thought about this book, the Art of Possibility, the title of the book, I thought, what would it be like if we would just all imagine that peace truly is possible? That love and grace and mercy and more of these things throughout the world are really possible. I think there would be more if we all believed it were truly possible. And then that very important part of the story where Mary was told, God is with you. And she said, here I am. Let it be with me according to your word. What would it be like if we could all say, okay, God, here I am. Have your way with me. What is it that you want me to do? Knowing that each of us is very different in terms of our personalities and the gifts we bring to the world. And I often think, what can I do more about peace? And a couple things crossed my mind just this morning, actually. And one was, I can choose peace every day. In fact, it is a choice for all of us. You can either choose fear and anxiety on the one hand, or peace and love on the other hand. We get to choose. And if you choose peace, you will influence people around you, whether you realize it or not. And I often ask myself, can I influence people more? And how can I influence people more? And I think about some of the things that I've done just this last year, writing letters to senators, writing to House of Representatives, writing letters or calling people here on the island, people who are part of the county council. When I believe in something, just picking up the phone or writing a letter, I hope I make a difference. I don't know how far the ripples go out or exactly what they do when I do things for peace, but I do believe that they make some difference. They make a difference because you're either choosing peace or you're choosing fear and anxiety. I think that we all want to make a difference for peace. And I think we often have the fear that we're not doing very much. And I just want to tell you right now, imagine your report card when you get to heaven with a big A+ on it. Imagine now that letter that you might write to God saying, I got an A+. Because here's who I was being in the world, and I know that I made a difference. You have to show up as you are. Some of us might be politicians, some of us might be educators, some of us might be preachers, some of us might be retired, some of us might just be budding musicians. Who knows? We all have our own unique place in the world, but we all can make a difference for peace. As I think about the candle of peace that we have lit here, I I think of the flame that goes on. You light the flame and you walk away and it keeps burning. It's still there. I think that's true for peace as well. You do something for peace in the world and it continues, even after you walk away, even after you're long gone. I invite you to choose peace, to imagine that A+ when you get to heaven, knowing that there's nothing to be afraid of, for God is always with you, and nothing's impossible with God. May we all have peace, because when we have it, we can share it. I invite you during this holiday season to invite peace into your heart, into your minds, into your being, and allow that peace to permeate all around you and ripple out in ways that you will never know. And may the world have more peace. Amen.